blood fell upward. I logged it as an impossible fact at 3:11 ship time under Ordo Malleus seal. I am Interrogator Medici Voss, attached to Magos biologist Chiron's salvage conclave aboard the Virtue of Iron, station keeping over Cadia's broken corpse. Outside the Auspex arch, crimson beads rose from the shattered surface of Shard 17, forsaking gravity to assemble into orbits like prayer beads around a dead saint. They pulsed as if with a heart that was not there. 13 beats, pause, 8 beats. The cadence set my teeth on edge. We had a 36-hour containment window before the inversion spread to nearby fragments and the warp pressure spike forced withdrawal. 3 Mechanicus harvest teams had gone dark in the wells below. Every cycle of that alien pulse tightened the screws on our timeline. The observation bay smelled of oil and old incense. Recycled air left a medicinal taste coating my tongue. The deck thrummed with the ship's litany, a deep iron hymn that usually brought comfort. Between the mechanical hums lay an unnatural quiet, the sort of silence you only hear after mass graves. On the tactical hololith, the shard presented as a cracked altar, slopes of vitrified basalt, bands of ash, glints of blackstone like splinters of night jammed into bone. My auspex confirmed what my eyes refused to accept. The ascending blood-maintained body temperature despite the void's kiss. 37.1 degrees Celsius. No coagulation. No cellular decay. Gene assay marked Cadian somatic markers at 0.78 probability. The sons and daughters of a murdered world, rising toward the stars in defiance of death itself. Record, I dictated. Rule violated. Natural gravitation. Secondary violation. Post-mortem blood exhibits thermal homeostasis and rhythmic activity absent a cardiac source. Chiron's vox came thin and metallic, his binharic cant chopped into low Gothic for my benefit. We are in the presence of Blackstone geometries, Interrogator. They impose new liturgies upon matter. The blood obeys. Blood obeys the body, I said. There is no body left. The body is Cadia. He intoned a short machine psalm, each line clicking on the offbeats of the 13-8 cadence. Racks of glass reliquaries rotated past my shoulder, captured samples cradled in brass and scripture. Servo skulls drifted like chained cherubs, their capillary filaments curled in tight knots, quivering as if in anticipation. I pressed the Medici scope to my eye. The captured globule trembled, not spherical but faceted, as if attempting to become a perfect shape it could not remember. Under magnification, no true cells presented, yet fibers not unlike fibrin wove and unwove themselves in time with the cadence. When I warmed the glass by a fraction, the beads cooled. When I cooled the glass, they warmed. Contrary. Ritualistic. Sergeant Hale stood at my shoulder, gaunt beneath his Cadian fatigues, a survivor who had nothing left to survive. He kept his hands clenched as if around a laser gun. The scars across his knuckles looked like faded drill lines. "You hear it too?" he asked. "I hear ship machinery." He shook his head. "No." Cadence. Parade ground at Casa Sanctum. 13 on, 8 off. They taught it to us as children, so we'd never lose step in a stampede. "There are no children on Cadia," I said, and swallowed the second half of the proverb. There were. The tactical display painted new horror in cold blue and arterial red. A vast, invisible funnel sloping down into the shard, its entrance ringed by orbits of blood, its floor etched in 60-degree teeth. It was shaped like regulation drill space, scaled to bury a regiment. The gravitational inversion cone expanded with each pulse cycle, drawing the ascending streams into increasingly complex patterns that hurt to contemplate. A proximity alarm chimed. One of the missing harvest team's tags blinked from dead to active, then back to dead, as if a thumb pressed and released against the skin of reality. A servitor's pict feed crawled to life through static. "Bring that up," I ordered. The screen unfogged. Grey ash field. Half-buried helmets like sea stones, crests caked with dust. A broken lass pack glinting like a tooth. The camera panned with mechanical patience, revealing the impossible truth. Blood rose from the stone between the helmets, not oozing, but ascending, thin as drawn wire before coalescing into perfect spheres that took up station along invisible parade lines. Zoom closer. The image enlarged. In the curve of one crimson globe, a scene reflected that could not be. A lamppost from a casa plaza, a child's chalk lines on ferrocrete, a hololithic banner that had never flown among these shards. Scattered light became memory, impossibly preserved in arterial amber. The servitor's camera tipped, obedient to a command no one on my deck had issued. It focused on a single helmet, Cadian green showing through ash where a gloved hand had brushed it clean. Between the cheek plates, stone opened in a hairline crack that filled and overflowed with nothing, only rose. A vein of red lifted like smoke in reverse. Casa Vortan issue, Hale murmured. 3rd Battalion. See the braid clip? I saw it then, a small kink in the helmet's crest mount where a braid had once been tied. The blood traced that kink as if remembering the weight that had hung there. The feed juddered, steadied, then cut to black. The halo of blood drew tight around the shard, tilting slowly toward our hull. Whatever force drove this impossible harvest grew stronger with each passing moment, and we had become its focus. Your decision, interrogator, Chiron said. I watched the ascending streams pulse their 13/8 rhythm, each beat marking time toward an unknown crescendo. The blood fell upward, and duty compelled us to follow. We go, down. The shuttle's retro thrusters fired in sequence, each burst timed to that cursed 13/8 cadence. Through the viewport, Shard 17 resolved from tactical abstraction to broken reality. Ash planes cracked like dried skin, blackstone fragments jutting at angles that hurt to contemplate, and everywhere the impossible sight of blood climbing toward heaven in thin red threads. Skitarii Alpha Rex checked his weapon's machine spirit with ritual precision, his augmetic eye cycling through spectra. Sergeant Hale sat rigid, hands wrapped around his laser-gun like a rosary. The pod's atmospheric recyclers labored against metallic taste that seemed to seep through the hull itself. We struck ground with bone-jarring impact. The hatch cycled open with pneumatic hiss, and Cadia's grave air rushed in, thin, cold, carrying sweet copper scent mixed with alkaline bite of pulverized stone. No decay, no corruption, only preservation. I stepped onto ash that sparkled with crystallized blood flecks. My boots crunched on debris that should have reeked of death, but smelled only of metal and ozone. The silence was wrong. No wind, no distant battle echoes, no buzzing flies, only the wet sound of liquid-defying physics and the distant hum of machinery serving no visible master. Auspex reading, I asked Rex. His augmetic word. Gravitational field inverted beneath primary anomalies, Blackstone resonance at 0.79 terahertz, depth indeterminate. The first well announced itself before we saw it, a chorus of voiceless motion, the hush of rising fluid, soft clink of reliquaries touching brass frames, periodic click of servitor syringes being primed, all set against the alternating thick-thin pull in my lungs that wasn't atmosphere but fear. The well yawned like a font that had forgotten its god. 6 meters down, a perfect cylinder bored through ferrocrete into bedrock that became something other than rock, dense, darker, almost fibrous. Blackstone shards studded the inner walls in regular lattice, edges angled precisely 60 degrees, each face engraved with sigils so faint they lived in peripheral vision. Blood climbed those walls like ladder rungs, advancing in waves. 13 pulses, stillness, 8 quick surges. Each pause felt like held breath. Servitors were harnessed along the rim by steel scapulars, their pallid backs crowded with injector scars, eyes replaced by sanctified lenses. Brass arms swung over the well, capillary needles dipping into uprising flow to drink. The reliquaries they fed were altar beautiful, thick glass cylinders bound in scripture and wire, each engraved with Cassar names, some full, some half, all warm to touch. I crouched beside the rim. A shrine plate was bolted there, stained by a scent. "Only in death does duty end," it read in clean high Gothic. Beneath, in shallower cuts, an unsanctioned hand had added, "Only in duty does death begin." The extra words were scratched in angular Cadian script, done quickly but with care. At the second well, I knelt and extended my auspex into the ascending stream. The blood parted around the probe like silk, neither warm nor cold, but somehow both. Readings made no sense, cellular structure absent, yet genetic markers present. Coagulation factors inactive, yet perfect cohesion maintained. Blood that had forgotten how to be blood, yet remembered everything else. A servitor approached, collection needle dripping crimson. As I watched, it pressed the needle against stone rim. Ferrocrete cracked with sound like breaking teeth, and from the fissure wept fresh tears of blood. The stone itself had become a wound. "The planet bleeds," Rex whispered through his Vox grill. Vox ghosts began overlaying our communications, phantom voices bleeding through from channels that should have been silent. Drill sergeants barked cadence in distance. Left, right, left, right. Children's voices sang marching songs in dialects I didn't recognize. Sound came from everywhere and nowhere, as if air itself had become recording medium for memories refusing to die. Shadows moved across wells where no figures cast them. Bloodstreams pulsed faster, as if excited by our presence. The collection reliquaries were nearly full, contents pulsing in perfect synchronization with 13/8 rhythm. Hail kept distance from one tube whose glass was scratched where hands had tried to grip from outside. Label read, KASRKRAKEN. He'd been 2 casas over when the gate died. He didn't speak, but his knuckles whitened on his weapon. I moved to examine seals more closely. My blood froze. The missing harvest team's Vox tags were embedded in reliquary housings, biometric displays showing active readings, heartbeats, respiration, neural activity, all signs of life, broadcasting from within sealed containers of collected blood. "Rex," I called, "scan reliquaries for human remains." His augmetic rotated, focusing on nearest container. Negative on skeletal structure, negative on tissue mass. Pause. Positive for human consciousness patterns. 3 distinct neural signatures, all active. The implications hit like melter blast. The harvest teams hadn't vanished. They'd been harvested. In distance, Child's voice began singing lullaby about soldiers who marched in sleep, who stood guard in dreams, who served Emperor even in death. Vox tags in reliquaries began pulsing in unison, biosigns synchronizing with 13/8 cadence. From within sealed containers, I heard sound that would haunt dreams, measured tap of gloved fingers against glass, keeping time to parade that would never end. The tapping from the reliquaries ceased as we approached the mobile cathedral, leaving only the whisper of ascending blood and our laboured breathing in the thin air. The Mechanicus sanctum squatted against a ridge like a Baroque beetle, its hull bristling with incense. Chimneys and vox masts. Servo skulls trailed capillary filaments that wrote endless numbers across the buttresses. 13, 8, 13. Arterial ink that dried and reformed in perpetual cycle. The gantry received us with mechanical precision, clamps securing our burden with maternal care. Inside, heat and cold, braided impossibly. Incense burned over centrifuges, sacred smoke ignoring air currents to align along invisible angles. Autoclaves throbbed like organs while servo skulls bobbed overhead, their capillary filaments writing the cursed numbers across bulkheads in wet red ink. Magos biologist Chiron waited beneath the nave, his form more machine than flesh. Blackstone slivers had been sutured into his cranial crest, glowing faintly as his mechadendrites folded in prayer-like configuration. When he spoke, his voice carried both vox static and whispered reverence. Interrogator. You have witnessed the wells, Now witness purpose. Panels irised open, revealing the hemolith, a black stone monolith the size of a sarcophagus, suspended in tungsten ribs. Its faceted surface drank light, edges meeting at angles that made teeth ache. Scriptural wire wrapped its planes in helixes, each twist stamped with half-familiar ordinances. The thing radiated the same wrong steadiness as the blood's cadence. Protocol Acheron/Redemptor, Chiron intoned, signing cogitator scrolls while blessing the air. Quorum-sanctioned synthesis of counter-psalms against rising warp pressure. We channel recalcitrant hemal resonance through blackstone geometry. The dead become him. The pylons, I said, understanding dawning cold in my chest. You're replacing Cadia's lost circuits. His optical array focused with mechanical precision. The Blackstone network created psychic quiet in the Imperium. Its destruction left vacuum. Nature abhors vacuum, interrogator. The blood carries somatic memory, neural patterns, genetic imperatives, final thoughts crystallized in hemoglobin. Properly filtered, these essences stabilize local warp pressure. Holoscreens flickered, showing Harvest Team Beta descending into a collection cistern. Their litanies clicked off cadence like broken boot heels. The blood surface trembled, then stilled into perfect mirror. No thermal signature registered, yet the readings climbed toward boiling point, entropy inverted to serve alien scripture. Run it again, I ordered. The footage looped. Beta's lead tech touched the mirror with a sampling wand. Light exploded across the feed. Not brightness, but subtraction. White that erased rather than illuminated. Crew silhouettes wavered, burned into salt. 32 seconds of nothing. At frame 2019, something pressed up from beneath. Flat, like a palm against glass. They are not dead, Chiron stated. Munitorum records mark Beta KIA, yet biometrics show active signatures. Data streams climbed in neat columns. Heart rates at parade rest, shallow, respiration, neural spikes at 13/8 intervals. The names bore familiar Cadian suffixes. Bureaucratic ghosts still marching across digital ledgers, never late, never absent. Where? I asked, though my hands already knew, cold through medici gloves. Distributed within the hemal medium, preserved within rhythm. Humidity climbed until sweat pooled between my shoulder blades. Droplets should have condensed on warm metal. Instead, frost formed on the hottest conduits, while heat gathered where cold should reign. The sanctum breathed with reversed physics, exhaling sweet metallic scent and the clean edge of fresh-cut veins. Hale approached the hemolith despite himself, then halted as his skin prickled. The blackstone reflected him wrong. No face, only a helm where his head should be, crest tied with a braid that wasn't his. Stand away, I commanded. He obeyed, but his knuckles whitened on his weapon. Fear held him as surely as duty. I accessed the casualty net through Malleus protocols. Names scrolled. Killed in action, confirmed, cross-linked. Yet every third name flickered. KIA to present, then back. Aligned with our intake cycles. Each pulse of the wells tugged at the ledger of living and dead, writing identical letters on both pages. Orbital contact, Rex voxed. Annulus density increasing. Halo approaching sanctum vector. Inversion amplifies, Chiron said with satisfaction. We proceed. He lifted articulated fingers, inscribing activation sigils. The hemolith thrummed. Reliquary banks exhaled collectively. Valves opened with wet clicks. The sanctum floor trembled once, as if a vast heart far below had stuttered. Cistern feeds shifted from grainy grey to slick black. The surfaces were mirrors now, too smooth, too complete. Within the dark, figures assembled in neat files. Helmets bore casa crests. Some wore braid clips. Eyes like coins sunk in water, mouths closed but suggesting the habit of song. The mirrored surface flexed. Faces sharpened as blood turned lens. A gloved hand rose, pressing outward against the inside of reality. Leather creaked. It began to tap. 13. Pause. 8. The sound carried through metal and bone, answering every rhythm in the sanctum. More hands multiplied beneath the mirror, faces tilted upward, listening to orders only they could hear. Chiron began the machine psalm, and gravity answered like a congregation. The hemolith thrummed its iron note, and environmental systems stuttered in 30 heartbeat cycles. During each amen of the litany, blood in the cisterns lifted as solid sheets, defying physics to maintain perfect formation. My mag boots alternated between lock and drift as the deck itself breathed beneath us. Tactical advance, I ordered, setting boots to adaptive mode. Low center of mass. Maintain spacing. Air pressure fluctuated with alien rhythm. Thin cold during 13 beats, thick warm during 8, creating respiratory cycles that weren't atmosphere, but something alive. My nose began bleeding upward, crimson threads seeking the nearest blackstone fragment instead of falling. I wiped the flow, but droplets refused gravity, orbiting my head before drifting toward the hemolith like iron filings to a magnet. Sergeant Hale began reciting Creed's catechisms, voice steady through discipline. Then his words doubled in the Vox channel. Another Hale speaking in perfect unison, syllables matching exactly but stripped of human warmth. The second voice carried the cold precision of parade ground instruction, mechanical and hollow. Emperor's blood, Hale whispered, hand clamping over his Vox bead. His eyes widened with recognition that transcended battlefield terror. Environmental corruption accelerated around us. Frost bloomed on heated conduits, while humidity condensed into pink mist that tasted of copper and ozone. Servo skulls wrote their endless numbers faster, arterial ink spelling coordinates across every surface in increasingly frantic loops. The cistern's mirrored surface bulged like pregnant glass. Something climbed from within, not floating, but ascending with purpose. The blood mirror shattered without fragments, forms rising from crimson depths with synchronized precision. The first construct emerged clean despite the medium, wearing a Cadian helm fused to its skull, like parasitic growth. No face beneath the visor, only smooth flesh marked with regulation scars. It performed a perfect military salute, movements crisp despite absent joints, then pointed toward the harvest manifold with deliberate accusation. Its extended arm began splitting, not tearing, but unraveling into capillary threads that lashed outward like prehensile whips. The filaments wrapped around Rex's throat with surgical precision, his augmetic eyes sparking as they found purchase in grillwork and beneath pauldrons. The construct's touch dropped ambient temperature 20 degrees instantly. Breath steamed, while sweat crystallized on skin. Rex made no sound. The threads prevented it. Only wet tearing noise as they tightened with liquid determination. Contact! I drew my bolt pistol, switching to blessed rounds. Hostile manifestation! The bolt punched through the creature's torso, explosive charge flowering its chest to reveal hollow space lined with pulsing fibers. No organs, no bone, only crimson architecture following the 13-8 rhythm. The construct straightened, saluted again, and continued its advance. More figures rose from blood wells, dozens emerging with military precision. They formed ranks automatically, a phalanx assembling from Cadia's liquid grave. Their boots struck ferrocrete with measured cadence, left, left, each impact resonating through the sanctum's hull like funeral drums. Vox channels filled with children's voices, singing drill cadences in dead dialects. Different ages, different pitches, all perfectly aligned to our cursed rhythm. Left, right, stand at attention, for the Emperor's might. Words once innocent now carried weight of 1,000,000 small deaths. I switched to incendiary rounds, watching creatures blister under Promethean fire. They staggered but reformed, spilled blood crawling uphill against gravity to rejoin parent forms with liquid devotion. They felt no pain, showed no fear, only duty crystallized into alien purpose. Fighting withdrawal, I commanded. Rex, Crack charges on tunnel supports. Hale's lasgun chattered, bolts punching through creature after creature. They absorbed damage like water-accepting stones, crimson holes closing without urgency. I noticed his firing arm darkening, veins beneath skin spelling letters in arterial script. S-T-A-N-D. The creatures pressed closer, synchronized advance creating walls of unnatural cold. One wore armor fragments bearing familiar insignia. 58th Shock, Casa Partox. Hale's own unit. The creature tilted its head in recognition, movements too human for comfort, too precise for accident. They're not random, Hale rasped. They're forming honor guard configuration. The construct wearing his unit's markings raised its arm, revealing a braid clip fused into its gauntlet. Regulation pattern, worn smooth by familiar fingers. It had been crafted not from random dead, but from specific soldiers. Metal and flesh combined with intimate knowledge of original wearers. Rex triggered charges. In the microsecond before detonation, I glimpsed the truth. These weren't just constructs wearing Cadian equipment. They were Cadian equipment wearing constructs, armor and flesh fused in ways suggesting the planet itself remembered its children. The explosion created momentary silence, large enough to hear something new. A heartbeat under stone, growing louder with each pulse. The creatures fell, but didn't die, already rising with mechanical precision as dust settled. Through clearing smoke, synchronized footfalls resumed from collapsed tunnels, suggesting more figures approaching through passages we hadn't mapped. The heartbeat accelerated, and I realized with growing dread that we hadn't disturbed a nest of horrors. We had awakened something vast and patient beneath Cadia's corpse. Something that had been waiting for exactly this moment to call its children home. The heartbeat under stone synchronized with our breathing, forcing our chests to rise and fall in someone else's drill. The constructs pressed their advance in regimental strength, moving like disciplined guardsmen but bearing no faces. Only Cadian helms dredged from grave soil, some pristine, others cracked and bearing faded sigils of long-dead cassas. They advanced in perfect file formation, their movements creating the measured percussion of parade ground drills. Overlapping fields of fire, I commanded, switching to incendiary rounds. Conserve ammunition. Target center mass. My bolt pistol chattered, blessed rounds punching through crimson forms that blistered and wept under promethium fire. The creatures staggered but never broke formation, spilled blood crawling uphill against gravity to rejoin parent forms with liquid determination. They absorbed damage like water accepting stones, wounds closing without urgency or pain. My Auspex passed their substance with clinical precision. No true cells, no nuclei, no platelets. Colloid lattices stabilized by Blackstone resonance, their veins serving as hollow conduits for command signals following 60-degree geometry. They did not think. They received. Sergeant Hale suffered a grazing wound across his firing arm, lasbolt scoring flesh in a clean line. Instead of bleeding out, the blood inside his arm turned and crawled toward the injury, dark lines spelling letters beneath his skin with arterial precision. S-T-A-N-D. His face went pale as he watched his own blood obey commands he hadn't given. Medicae, he whispered, voice tight with controlled panic. I applied a field dressing, but the wound refused to close properly. The blood beneath the bandage pulsed with 13/8 rhythm, synchronized with the advancing constructs. Whatever force animated these creatures was calling to the essence within living bodies, seeking conversion rather than destruction. The constructs moved with military precision that transcended mimicry. They executed proper flanking maneuvers, maintained spacing, covered each other's advance with movements born of genuine tactical knowledge. Their presence created zones of unnatural cold that made breath steam and sweat crystallize. Frost bloomed on heated conduits where they passed, environmental systems struggling against their alien influence. Fighting withdrawal to sub-pylon tunnels, I ordered. Use phosphorus to disrupt coherence. Rex triggered white phosphorus canisters, chemical fire washing over the advancing forms. They staggered through flames without screaming, their movements creating wet, tearing sounds as superheated blood boiled and reformed. The phosphorus disrupted their cohesion temporarily, buying precious seconds for retreat. Mechanicus prayers transmitted over open channels began degrading into drill chants. Chiron's litanies shifted from sacred binharik to parade ground cadence, his augmetic voice keeping time with approaching footfalls. The corruption spread through our communications, turning holy words into military commands. We bounded backward through sanctum corridors, using crack charges to collapse sections behind us. The creatures followed with relentless patience, their synchronized footfalls echoing through collapsed passages. They felt no urgency, showed no frustration, only duty crystallized into alien purpose. One construct wore armor fragments marked with casa crests I recognized, some bearing Hale's own unit, insignia, metal scorched by battles he had survived. The creature tilted its head with too human recognition, movements precise yet familiar. It raised its arm, revealing a braid clip fused into its gauntlet, regulation pattern, worn smooth by fingers that had once tied it with living hands. They're not random manifestations, I realized aloud. They're specific soldiers. The construct wearing familiar markings approached with deliberate care. As it moved, I glimpsed the truth. These weren't just constructs wearing Cadian equipment. They were Cadian equipment wearing constructs, armor and flesh, fused with intimate knowledge of original wearers. A Skitari's augmetic eye suddenly filled with hemofluid from within. Organic components flooding with crimson that shouldn't exist in mechanical systems. The eye rotated to look outward with alien intelligence, its lens focusing on something beyond our perception. When it spoke, the voice carried parade ground authority. Present arms. The infected Skitari raised his weapon with mechanical precision, movements synchronized with the advancing constructs. His remaining organic eye widened in horror as his augmetics obeyed commands from an alien source. Orbital augers crackled through vox static. The red halo was thickening, ascending blood congealing into rings around the shard. Munitorum systems began reciting casualty rolls in reverse order, from Z to A, names spoken in voices that matched no living personnel. Hale froze, staring at one construct whose movements triggered recognition beyond fear. The creature wore a braid clip identical to one he had seen before. His sister's regulation braid. She who had died at Cadia's gate. The construct lifted its visor with deliberate care, revealing underneath only a mirror of blood that reflected Hale's own face, performing a perfect military salute. "My sister," he whispered, voice cracking. "It remembers." He took a step forward despite himself, drawn by threads of memory and loss, his lasgun lowering. The construct tilted its head in almost human recognition, then pointed toward the depths with gloved precision. As Hale stepped forward, the floor gave way beneath our feet with sickening crunch of grinding stone and bone. The black stone beneath the sanctum, foundation I had assumed solid, buckled along precise angles. We plunged into darkness, leaving synchronized footfalls echoing above us, counting cadence for an army that would never stop marching. We struck stone that yielded like flesh, the impact jarring through mag boots as emergency lumens flickered to life. The chamber yawned around us, cool and angular, carved by geometry that hurt to contemplate. Above, the din of synchronized marching became distant percussion, boots keeping time through layers of rock and bone. The air hung dry and cold, yet my skin prickled with unnatural humidity. Rex's augmetic eyes cycled through spectra, servos whining, as he passed impossible readings. Sub-foundational structure confirmed. Blackstone resonance at critical threshold. Geological composition. His voice faltered, mechanical certainty cracking. Ossified strata. The bedrock has been converted. The hemolith sat atop a foundation that made my Medicaid training recoil. What I had assumed was carved stone revealed itself as ribbed architecture of fused rock and bone, Cadia's geological layers compressed into organic infrastructure. Arterial channels carved along 60-degree angles pulsed with ascending crimson, following Blackstone geometry with liquid devotion. The planetoid fragment wasn't debris. It was a corpse with a functioning circulatory system. "Emperor's blood," Hale whispered, understanding dawning cold across his features. "The wells aren't extraction points. They're intake organs," I finished, my auspex confirming the horror. The ossified foundation maintained body temperature despite void exposure. Mineral veins carried hemofluid through channels that followed precise geometric patterns, each pulse synchronized to the 13/8 cadence. The entire fragment is behaving like a living organism. Chiron's vox crackled through interference, his binharic cant degraded by proximity to the hemolith. Interrogator: "You witness Protocol Acheron/Redemptor's true purpose." Pre-heresy pylons dampened warp energy through Blackstone resonance, creating psychic quiet in the Imperium. Their destruction left vacuum. The Quorum calculated replacement circuits, using human hemal resonance as conductive medium. "You're using Cadian blood as circuitry," I stated, clinical detachment warring with revulsion. Gene-keyed somatic markers ensure proper conductivity. Each draw amplifies vacuum in the Imperium, creating pressure differential that demands equilibrium. His optical array flickered with something approaching uncertainty. "We calculated the blood would buffer the warp breach, but the anomaly feeds on itself. The system requires exponential input to maintain stable output." Environmental readings spiked as the hemolith drew power from its ossified foundation. Temperature gradients inverted, frost forming on heated surfaces while cold metal radiated warmth. The chamber itself began breathing, expanding and contracting with alien rhythm as if we had been swallowed by something vast and patient. I approached the foundation's base, where familiar words were carved in precise High Gothic. "Only in death does duty end." Someone had ritually underlined the word death with arterial ink that never dried, emphasizing transformation rather than conclusion. Below, in angular Cadian script, "Only in duty does death begin." "Show me the full scope," I demanded, invoking inquisitorial authority. Holographic displays materialized reluctantly, revealing the truth in cold mathematics. 13 shards, 8 nodes per shard, 13 annuli per system. The FIDE scope struck like melter blast. This wasn't containment, but prototype testing for galaxy-wide deployment. Every human world would become a blood farm, populations harvested to maintain artificial quiet in the warp. "This is here tech," I declared. "You're converting human souls into machinery." "I am preserving them in functional form," Chiron replied with mechanical certainty. "The alternative is wasteful decay." Authority conflict erupted as I prepared formal interdiction. My vox crackled with Inquisitor Mardek's voice, familiar, authoritative, speaking from orbit with practiced command. Then his words degraded, syllables stretching and compressing until they became children's voices singing Cadian nursery rhymes. "Left foot, right foot, soldiers bright, marching through eternal night." The realization struck with nauseating clarity. We weren't containing a breach, but feeding something that grew stronger with each harvest. The ascending blood wasn't random, it was recruitment, gathering essence to expand the engine's reach across the void. Environmental pressure spiked as the chamber's breathing accelerated. Humidity condensed into crimson mist that carried memories not our own. Casa plazas, drill yards, children learning cadence, because that's what children do in fortress worlds built of war. The ossified foundation pulsed faster, arterial channels glowing with increased throughput. From depths below came measured tapping of gloved fingers against stone, keeping time to parade rhythms that would never end. The hemolith's interface opened like a mouth, revealing coupling points designed for living contact. Tubes unfurled with obscene hunger, tasting air for genetic markers that would complete the circuit. "The engine calls your name, interrogator," Chiron intoned. "You carry proper somatic resonance. Cadian gene markers from ancestors who served fortress worlds. You can complete the great work. The coupling points oriented toward me with mechanical precision, their surfaces warm with anticipation. In their reflection, I saw myself with blackened irises and veins spelling "stand" beneath my skin. The same transformation beginning in hail, the same corruption that had claimed the harvest teams. My vox crackled with coordinates spoken in voices of multiple ages. 13 shards, 8 nodes, 13 annuli. The numbers carved themselves into bulkheads in arterial script, each digit pulsing with the heartbeat beneath stone. The choice crystallized before me: feed the engine and possibly save the sector, or destroy it and risk a warp surge that would tear reality apart. Either path led through blasphemy, but only one preserved the humanity I had sworn to protect. Above us, synchronized footfalls resumed their eternal march, counting cadence for an army that would never rest. The ossified chamber's exit delivered us into the sanctum's command tier, where Chiron waited beneath, cogitator arches like a techno-priest conducting mass for the damned. Vox screens bloomed with arterial graphs, pressure curves drawing knives across tactical displays. The air hung thick with incense and ozone, while servo skulls wrote their endless numbers in blood across every surface: 13, 8, 13. Warp pressure, cresting in 31 minutes, Chiron announced, his voice splitting between Binharic cant and low Gothic. 2 admissible solutions remain. He raised 1 mechadendrite, runes forming in the incense haze. Expand intake by factor 9.6. Complete the Blackstone annulus. Haemol throughput channels counter-psalm frequencies that may smother the wave. The second appendage rose, colder runes scrolling. Alternative: sever the ossified engine, pressure vents into Imperium. Result: catastrophic local failure with unknown systemic propagation. Unknown meaning unmeasurable, I stated. Correct. The quiet must be maintained. I stepped closer, frost chasing warmth across deck plates in hissing veils. The reliquary banks swelled like a sleeper's chest, their contents pulsing with 13-8 rhythm. Your quiet consumes people, Magos. Cadians who served and died promised rest. They continue service, Chiron replied with mechanical certainty. Function over waste. Hale's jaw worked, knuckles white on his laser gun. Cadian blood belongs to Cadia. We don't get spent twice. Cadia promised victory to the Imperium. Chiron countered almost gently. Our methods honor that covenant. I invoked Ordinance 13 Black Cadence, each clause weighted with inquisitorial authority. Human sacrifice for technological advancement constitutes heretech. You will cease operations immediately. His augmetics flexed with unhappy music. Sacrifice is measure, interrogator. Prohibition applies to wasteful expenditure, not optimization of resources. You don't redefine murder, I said. Not even to save what you're destroying. Environmental systems screamed warnings as ash turned crimson, humidity spiking until sweat steamed pink from skin. The hemolith drew power from its foundation, arterial channels brightening as the engine prepared for final consumption. Rex's vox crackled through interference. Orbital contact imminent, halo density increasing. Virtue of iron reports micro-impacts against hull plating. The tactical display showed horror in cold mathematics. Ascending blood had congealed into a ring around the shard, tilting toward our ship like a closing mouth. Biosignatures aboard the vessel fluctuated as crew reported nosebleeds, vertigo, blood flowing upward from minor wounds. Hull breach in 17 minutes, Rex updated. The sanctum doors answered with measured blows. 13 impacts, pause, 8 more, each strike resonating through chamber ribs. On the final beat, dead-still vox channels whispered children's cadence. Left, right, stand, at attention for the Emperor's might. Every screen flashed identical arterial script. D-U-T-Y. The letters pulsed with the heartbeat beneath stone. synchronized with marching above and the engine's hungry rhythm. My vox crackled with Inquisitor Mardek's voice, strong with orbital command, ordering interdiction and evacuation. Then syllables stretched, degraded into nursery rhymes sung by voices of multiple ages. I tore the bead from my ear, but whispers continued through the floor's bones. The annulus will anchor, Chiron pressed. Wave breaks and holds. Price, sufficient Cadian hemal resonance. How much? I demanded. Current stock, survivors, attached regiments. No, Hale interrupted, the word flayed raw. You don't get to spend us again. Authority cascaded through failing systems. My inquisitorial codes triggered responses from isolated networks, atmospheric recyclers humming parade cadences, servo skulls writing coordinates in blood, vox channels broadcasting drill songs. The coupling points below pulsed with increased urgency, their surfaces warm with anticipation. In polished metal reflections, I glimpsed myself wearing a Cadian helm, eyes blackened with arterial ink, mouth moving in silent cadence. You cannot comprehend the scope, Chiron's voice carried desperation beneath certainty. Without buffer, pressure cascades sector-wide. Billions die. Billions die regardless, I replied. You're making it orderly. The marching ceased suddenly, silence large enough to hear individual heartbeats. Then synchronized descent began through unmapped passages, constructs following geometry we hadn't discovered. Options are time-bound, Chiron continued. Decision within 9 cycles. Not we, I said, surprising myself with the word's weight. Me. The choice crystallized with brutal clarity. Feed the machine and possibly save the ship, or destroy it and risk warp surge tearing reality apart. Either path led through blasphemy, but mathematics were clear. The engine would never stop consuming. Hale looked at me with Cadian dust ground into his scars. Better a wound that heals than chains that never end. The doors bowed inward, hinges screaming as rust fell like red snow. Through growing seams, something tapped jams in perfect march step, patient as stone, waiting for our argument to conclude. Above us, synchronized footfalls resumed, counting cadence for an army that had forgotten how to rest. The sanctum doors surrendered with ceremonial reluctance, hinges screaming their death song before falling silent on the final beat. The constructs flooded through in regimental strength, moving with drilled precision that transcended mimicry. They were guardsmen who had forgotten how to die, bearing helms and armor plates dredged from Cadia's grave soil. No battle cry, no roar of fury. They presented arms with bone lances that gleamed like polished teeth, every movement synchronized to the 13/8 heartbeat pulsing through chamber walls. "Defensive fire!" I commanded, bolt pistols spitting consecrated rounds. "Break their formation!" The blessed ammunition punched through crimson forms, promethium fire washing over the first ranks. They blistered and wept under chemical flame, but spilled blood refused to die. It atomized into stinging mist that bit at eyes and throat, then crawled uphill along buttresses to rejoin parent forms with liquid devotion. The floor ran slick with ascending crimson that caught at mag boots, each droplet seeking the nearest blackstone fragment, like iron filings drawn to magnets. Hale's lasegun chattered desperate litany, carved lines through advancing ranks. His eyes fixed on one construct near the vanguard. Its helm bore a familiar braid clip, regulation pattern nicked where it had caught on Casa gates. The creature turned with recognition that transcended battlefield horror, movements precise, yet heartbreakingly familiar. "No," Hale whispered, voice cracking. "Not her." The constructs advanced in proper formation, maintaining spacing, covering each other's movement with tactical knowledge crystallized in blood and duty. Their presence created zones of unnatural cold that made breath steam and sweat crystallize. Frost crept over heated conduits while servo skulls crashed from the vault, capillary filaments still writing their endless numbers even as they died. A Skitari beside me screamed, high mechanical shriek as his augmetic eye pulsed with arterial light. Hemofluid had found purchase in his systems, crimson filaments erupting beneath skin to connect him to the deck. He turned with rigid precision, weapon raised against us, his organic eye wide with terror, while augmetics obeyed alien commands. "Contagion spreading," Rex reported, his own system sparking as he fought similar infection. "Withdraw to sub-pylon access." I triggered phosphorus canisters, white chemical fire creating temporary barriers. The constructs staggered through flames without screaming, their synchronized footfalls never breaking cadence. We bounded backward by doctrine, two kneel while one moves, each kill shot buying precious seconds against creatures that felt no pain, showed no fear. Orbital communications crackled through degrading channels. Annulus density climbing. Hull micro-impacts detected. Casualty rolls. Repeating. Munitorum systems recited names in reverse order, the dead called as if to morning muster, while children's voices sang parade cadences in dialects that should have been silent. The construct bearing his sister's braid approached Hale with deliberate care. It executed perfect present arms, then tilted its head in gesture so human it made him weep tears that flowed upward, seeking the Hemelith's hungry embrace. "She remembers," he said, voice thick with impossible hope. The creature lifted its visor with gentle precision. Underneath lay no face, only a mirror of blood, perfectly smooth, reflecting Hale's own grief-stricken features. In that crimson surface, his reflection performed a military salute before he could stop himself, arm rising under commands he hadn't given. "That's not your sister," I said, grabbing his shoulder. "It's wearing her memory." But Hale stepped forward despite my grip, drawn by threads of loss and recognition. The construct pointed toward the depths with movements carrying authority of older siblings, guiding younger ones through Fortress World drills. Environmental systems failed in cascading collapse. The Hemelith's song climbed a quarter tone, drawing power from its ossified foundation. Arterial channels brightened as the engine prepared for final consumption. Through the red mist, more constructs emerged, dozens wearing familiar unit insignia, some bearing Hale's own regimental markings. "They're not random," I realized aloud. "They're specific soldiers." The floor trembled once, as if something vast beneath had turned its attention like a searchlight. The constructs paused, listening to orders only they could hear. The march resumed, faster and more urgent. We reached the transept threshold as bone lances kissed armor with surgical precision. I whispered medici sterilization prayers backward, words congealing on lance tips like frost, forcing momentary retreat. But the pressure wave rolling through the sanctum bowed banners toward the altar, stealing fractions of our heat, moisture, resolve. "Charges on keystones," I ordered. Rex slapped crack charges onto structural points with mechanical contempt for delicacy. Detonation flattened sound into paper-thin absence before reality snapped back. The arch collapsed in perfect triangles, buying heartbeats of silence before lances began tapping through rubble with sculptor's precision. The Blackstone foundation buckled beneath us, with grinding sounds of stone and bone fracturing along 60-degree angles. What I had assumed solid, cracked in geometric patterns following the Hemelith's influence. The floor accepted instruction from below, opening along perfect seams. As we fell into darkness, synchronized footfalls echoed above, counting cadence for an army that would never stop marching, boots keeping eternal time through layers of rock and bone toward whatever waited in the depths. We struck angular stone that yielded like cartilage, the impact jarring through mag boots as emergency lumens painted geometric shadows across walls carved in perfect 60-degree intersections. The marching above became distant percussion, boots keeping eternal time through layers of ossified rock and bone. Here in the pylon's heart, air hung cool and dry, sound dying inches from our mouths, as if the chamber absorbed noise like a hungry throat. The Blackstone geometry resonated with the 13/8 cadence, each facet humming at frequencies that made teeth ache and bones vibrate with alien sympathy. Frost traced thin lines along the sharpest angles, while the chamber's center held humid warmth, like something alive, breathing in measured cycles that matched the rhythm pulsing through stone and steel above. When I pressed my palm against the nearest wall, present tense auditory flashbacks crashed over me like breaking waves. Casa Vortan's final vox traffic crackled through my skull. Creed's voice barking coordinates through static, desperate orders echoing across burning plazas. Children learning drill songs in cellar light, because that's what Fortress World children do when the world dies around them. The sounds were vivid, immediate, as if the stone itself conducted living moments across time. Emperor's blood, I whispered, understanding cascading cold through my chest. This is Cadia speaking through fossilized memories. Rex's augmetic eye cycled through spectra, servos whining as he passed impossible readings. Blackstone resonance at critical threshold. Pylon fragment shows secondary function. When properly tuned, converts hemal memory into stabilizing waveforms. It requires a living conductor to complete the circuit. The revelation struck like melter blast. The Blackstone had crystallized memories, preserving final thoughts in hemofluid that refused to decay. Every drop of ascending blood carried somatic memory, neural patterns, genetic imperatives, last words crystallized in hemoglobin and suspended in arterial amber. The dead weren't gone. They were archived, their essence processed into ammunition against the warp itself. A relic marker emerged from shadow, brass plate tarnished but readable. Hemelith Key Sigma, authorized personnel only, by order of the Quorum. Below, in angular Cadian script, someone had scratched coordinates and a single word. Remember. Blood began seeping from hairline cracks in the stone, not in random rivulets, but forming precise maps along the floor. The crimson traced pathways and nodes that mimicked stellar cartography, each intersection marking coordinates across the segmentum obscurus. In the slick reflection, I saw myself with blackened irises and veins, spelling "stand" beneath my skin in arterial script. The corruption is accelerating, I said, watching my blood answer calls I hadn't given. Hale approached the convergence point despite himself, then halted, as recognition prickled across his scarred features. I've been here before. Not here exactly. In dreams. Every Cadian dreams this place. The room where duty never ends. I accessed the casualty net through failing Malleus protocols. Names scrolled in arterial script. Killed in action, confirmed, cross-linked. Yet every third name flickered between KIA and present, status changing with each pulse of the wells above. The ledger of living and dead had become fluid, writing identical letters on both pages. They're still on the roster, I breathed. The engine keeps them present for duty. Environmental pressure spiked as the node began opening, not with mechanical precision, but organic articulation, stone parting like lips revealing secrets. The passage descended in tight planes that shared no common curve, only insistent 60-degree angles. Frost filmed the edges while the center glistened with warm condensation that tasted of copper and remembrance. Orbital pressure climbing, Rex voxed through static. Annulus formation accelerating, hull micro-impacts detected. Above us, the marching resumed with mechanical precision, but now I understood its purpose. The constructs weren't hunting us. They were herding us toward the node, following geometry that would deliver us to the Hemelith's hungry embrace. The indicated passage thrummed with increasing urgency, its surfaces warm despite the chamber's cold. Through polished stone, I glimpsed reflections that weren't ours. Figures in Cadian uniform standing at attention, eyes forward, mouths moving in silent cadence that spelled duty in movements older than words. Chiron's voice crawled across failing vox channels. Subcrypt confirmed. You stand in a pylon heart. The key interfaces with the coupling above. A living conductor completes the counter signal, converts memory into him. The node's entrance pulsed with arterial light, revealing the path deeper into Cadia's transformed heart. Beyond lay Hemelith Key Sigma, obsidian veined with dull red, thrumming at 72 beats per minute, before shifting to the cursed 13/8 pattern that had become our world's metronome. "It's calling," Hale said, voice thick with recognition that transcended fear. "The way she used to call me home." The coupling points ahead opened like flowers, anticipating rain, their surfaces warm with anticipation. In their reflection, I saw myself wearing a Cadian helm, eyes blackened with arterial ink, mouth moving in silent parade commands I had never learned but somehow knew. We approached the threshold as environmental systems screamed warnings, each step bringing us closer to the choice that would define not just our fate, but the sector's future. Behind us, synchronized footfalls counted eternal cadence. Ahead lay the Hemelith's heart, hungry for the living conductor it needed to complete its blasphemous work. The 13/8 rhythm accelerated like a heart under stress, and I realized with growing dread that we hadn't discovered the engine's weakness. We had found its mouth, and it was preparing to feed. The node's mouth widened as we descended, stone parting with organic reluctance to reveal Hemelith Key Sigma, cradled on a dais of black glass. The artifact was the size of a coffin lid, obsidian veined with dull red that pulsed like arterial flow. It thrummed at 72 beats per minute, human resting heart rate, before shifting without warning into the cursed 13/8 pattern that had become our world's metronome. "Technical requirement confirmed," Rex reported, his augmetic eye passing impossible readings. "Living conductor enables controlled discharge to craft countersignal. Cadian Hemal imprint required for proper resonance. The key's surface drank light while radiating killing cold that made breath crystallize. Environmental readings spiked as pressure climbed and humidity condensed into pink mist, carrying memories not our own. Casa plazas, drill yards, children learning cadence because that's what Fortress World children do when worlds die around them." Chiron's voice crackled through failing vox. "The circuit requires completion, interrogator. Genetic signature focuses resonance. Living blood anchors the counter-psalm." Sergeant Hale approached with deliberate steps, his scarred face set in grim resolve. The arterial script beneath his skin pulsed with faint internal light, spelling "stand" in letters that moved when he breathed. He removed his glove with ceremonial care, revealing a hand marked by battle and duty. "I know what this is," he said quietly. "Every Cadian dreams this moment, the choice between rest and service." "Hale, stand down," I commanded, but his fingers were already reaching toward the key's surface. "No," he said with quiet certainty. "This is why Cadia stands. Not because we're unbreakable, because when we break, we choose how the pieces fall." He placed his palm against the obsidian. The key responded instantly, tubes unfurling like hungry fingers, tasting his skin with obscene delicacy. Blood rose without cutting, drawn through pores as if his body had always been waiting for this moment. The tubes braided into his veins with surgical precision, arterial script spelling duty beneath his skin in living calligraphy. "Body horror liturgy initiated," I logged clinically, watching his integration with the key's matrix. Hale began reciting Cadian catechisms, while his blood flowed in patterns matching the 13/8 rhythm, his face growing pale but determined. Present tense immersion crashed through the chamber. The pulse jumped, stone breathed, temperature climbed as sweat turned to pink dew. My chronometer stuttered between present and past, displaying dates that had never existed alongside coordinates from battles that would never end. "Orbital status critical," Rex voxed through static. "Red halo achieving hull contact in 8 minutes. Magos demands immediate status." Through the arterial connection, whispers multiplied. Thousands of Cadian voices reciting litany. "Only in death does duty end." "No," Hale corrected, his voice carrying new authority drawn from the key's depths. Only in duty does death begin. He drew his sidearm with his free hand, the motion smooth despite tubes threading through his flesh. The key's hunger intensified, drawing deeper as his commitment solidified. Without hesitation, he pressed the muzzle to his palm and fired. The last discharge cracked like breaking bone. Light spat through flesh into Blackstone, but his blood refused to flow. It rose in clean columns, welcomed and braided into the key's matrix. The Hemelith drank his life essence with vampiric precision, while his body found new center somewhere deeper than organs. The key went blacker than black, absorbing even the idea of reflection. Then it radiated killing cold that crystallized air into falling snow. Environmental systems screamed warnings as temperature plummeted 40 degrees in heartbeats. The key's surface cracked along perfect angles, revealing arterial light pulsing within obsidian depths. Above us, the cadaver engine answered with cathedral knell that resonated through stone and bone. The marching boots stopped. Sudden silence large enough to hear individual heartbeats, then restarted faster, more urgent, as if the entire army had received new orders. Hale's eyes opened, but they were no longer entirely his. Arterial script flowed beneath his irises, spelling coordinates across the segmentum obscurus. When he spoke, his voice carried harmonics of million parade grounds, children learning cadence, soldiers standing at attention in the Emperor's name. Moral weight confirmed, I whispered, understanding the sacrifice's true cost. Hale hadn't just activated a weapon. He had created a martyr whose essence now powered our only hope. His blood carried genetic memory of every Cadian who had ever stood at attention, every child who had learned parade cadence, every soldier who had died believing duty transcended death. Status update. I voxed to orbit. Key Sigma activated, conductor integrated. Chiron's response crackled with satisfaction. Excellent. Annulus stabilizes. You have saved the sector. But I realized with growing dread we hadn't saved anything. We had fed the machine exactly what it needed, willing sacrifice whose genetic memory could anchor countersarm across the void. The engine would never stop consuming, and now it had Martyr's blessing to justify its hunger. The chamber shuddered as synchronized footfalls approached through unmapped passages. They weren't hunting us anymore. They were escorting us to final sacrament, ensuring their martyred brother's sacrifice wouldn't be wasted. Above us, the engine sang renewed purpose, and I prepared to carry the key toward whatever waited in crimson depths, knowing each step brought us closer to choice between damnation and duty that would echo across stars. Moving toward the engine heart with Key Sigma, Hale walked with arterial tubes threading through his flesh like living scripture. The obsidian artifact thrummed against his chest, heavy not by mass but by intention, drawing power from his transformed circulatory system. Each step followed 60-degree geometry carved into stone, the 13/8 rhythm pulsing through chamber walls with mechanical devotion. My auspex passed the orbital formation with horrifying clarity, the thickening halo of blood creating negative warp pressure around Shard 17. Macro twist confirmed, I voxed through failing channels. This isn't random debris. It's a sanguine annulus generating psychic vacuum. Chiron's response crackled with satisfaction. Blackstone creates quiet in the Imperium. The quorum forced that quiet open, and nature abhors vacuum. Cadia's dead are extruded as ballast to fill the psychic void. The scope struck like a physical blow. Blackstone pylons had once dampened warp energy through resonance, creating stable quiet in the Empyrean. Their destruction left vacuum that demanded equilibrium. The ascending blood wasn't defying physics. It was answering an accounting error in the immaterium, plugging silence with crystallized memory until the numbers balanced. Show me full deployment, I demanded, invoking inquisitorial authority. Holographic displays materialized reluctantly, revealing horror in cold mathematics. Similar harvests were seeded on other shards. This was prototype for galaxy-wide implementation. 13 shards. 8 nodes per shard, 13 annuli per system. Every human world would become blood farm, populations harvested to maintain artificial quiet while something vast fed on duty, crystallized in arterial amber. A sacrament of endless sacrifice, I breathed, converting death into eternal service. Environmental pressure spiked as gales began within tunnels, pressure differentials pulling air toward the engine's hungry core. Humidity condensed into red fog that tasted of copper and ozone, carrying whispers in dead dialects, children singing parade cadences, drill sergeants barking orders that would echo across eternity. Mechanicus chorus recited coordinates through degrading vox channels. 13 shards, 8 nodes, 13 annuli. The voices multiplied until they became army of children learning duty, innocence preserved in hemofluid, while essence powered blasphemous machinery. Technical requirement confirmed, I observed clinically. Dual conductor system enables controlled discharge. Key sigma anchors resonance. Primary coupling channels living essence. Hale's wounded hand no longer bled. The blood refused to leave, clinging to obsidian with liquid devotion. Arterial script flowed beneath his skin with alien light, spelling coordinates across the segmentum obscurus. When he spoke, harmonics of million voices echoed beneath his words. The system tunes specifically to your gene markers, interrogator, he said, eyes reflecting internal illumination. Cadian heritage, ancestors who served fortress worlds. You carry proper somatic resonance. The engine called my name in voice like grinding stone and flowing blood, demanding its chosen conductor. Through layers of rock and steel, I felt its hunger, patient, implacable, justified by mathematics of salvation. My blood answered without permission, warming toward nearest blackstone fragments. Orbital status critical, Rex voxed through static. Annulus density climbing, hull micro-impacts detected. Crew reporting nosebleeds, vertigo, blood flowing upward from minor wounds. The virtue of iron groaned under pressure it wasn't designed to bear, hull plates buckling as ascending crimson found purchase in metal and flesh. My chronometer displayed 17 minutes to catastrophic decompression, numbers pulsing with 13/8 cadence. Body horror intensified as my veins swelled, extruding red filaments toward key sigma. The coupling ahead displayed single word in arterial script: continue. Environmental systems screamed warnings as temperature gradients inverted, frost forming on heated surfaces while cold metal radiated unnatural warmth. Dual conductor requirement confirmed, Chiron announced through vox static. Living essence channels counter psalm frequencies, dead essence anchors resonance. Together, perfect buffer against warp incursion. I felt gentle parade step pull in my chest, rhythm of marching feet that would never stop. My pulse sometimes matched 13/8 cadence, sometimes stopped while another quieter rhythm continued. The engine learning to use my heartbeat as timekeeper for its work. You understand now, Hale said, voice carrying authority of older siblings, guiding younger ones through fortress world drills. This is why Cadia stands. Not because we're unbreakable, because when we break, we choose how pieces fall. The tunnels opened onto the cadaver engine's core, cathedral of ribbed stone and metal, with nave of ascending fluid and altar of hemolith coupling. Constructs massed in ranks, then parted with ceremonial precision. They recognized the conductor, living key that would complete their eternal march. Through polished surfaces, I glimpsed myself wearing Cadian helm, eyes blackened with arterial ink, mouth moving in silent cadence I had never learned but somehow knew. The engine sang renewed purpose as synchronized footfalls resumed above, counting time toward whatever waited in crimson depths. Each step brought us closer to choice between damnation and duty that would echo across stars, knowing the machine would never stop consuming. And now it had Martyr's blessing to justify its hunger. The tunnels opened onto the cadaver engine's core, a cathedral of ribbed stone and metal, with nave of ascending fluid and altar of hemolith coupling. The constructs massed in ranks along the aisles, hundreds strong, their helms bearing casa crests dredged from grave soil. They moved with ceremonial precision. Bone lances grounded in salute, parting to create corridors of unnatural cold. They recognized the conductor. They recognized the key. Defensive positions, I commanded, though the words felt hollow, against the cathedral's vastness. Melter charges on buttress nodes. Establish denial fields with promethium. Rex moved with mechanical precision, placing charges at structural points, while his augmetic eye sparked with increasing interference. The hemofluid had found purchase in his systems, crimson filaments threading through circuitry like parasitic veins. Environmental extremes intensified, heatless cold sinking into bones while breath steamed pink, each exhalation carrying whispers in dead dialects. Sensor arrays compromised, Rex reported, voice splitting between human distress and binary satisfaction. Charges armed but firing mechanisms degraded. Hemofog dampens promethium igniters. The ascending blood had atomized into stinging mist that bit at eyes and throat, each droplet seeking the nearest Blackstone fragment with magnetic devotion. Technical failure cascaded through our equipment as sensor arrays blared flatline tones, charges misfiring under the fog's obscene influence. I intoned the litany of unmaking backwards, Medici sterilization prayers transforming into counterchants against the engine's silent hymn. My hands remained steady despite their trembling, Chi Sigma radiating killing cold against my palm, while arterial script pulsed beneath Hale's skin with 13/8 rhythm. At the altar's base, tubing unfurled like hungry fingers, caressing my wrists with obscene gentleness. The filaments read pulse and pressure as the machine tasted my genetic heritage, borrowing my heartbeat to power calculations I couldn't comprehend. My chronometer displayed 9 minutes to hull breach, numbers pulsing with mechanical devotion. Recognition confirmed, I whispered, understanding cascading cold through Medici training. The coupling points orient specifically toward Cadian gene markers. Hale approached the altar with deliberate steps, Chi Sigma thrumming against his chest while tubes pulsed with alien rhythm. His face had gained inhuman serenity, duty crystallized beyond fear or doubt. When he spoke, harmonics of million parade grounds echoed beneath his words. The only way to detonate is from within, he said, arterial light flowing beneath his irises. Complete the circuit. Let it drink. Overload from internal pressure. The hemolith coupling opened like flower anticipating rain, revealing interfaces designed for living contact. Obsidian surfaces drank light while radiating hunger like heat from forge fire. The constructs raised lances in synchronized salute, their movements creating symphony of creaking leather and grinding bone. Melter triggers routed through Medicae Auspex, I reported, keying detonators to my biometric readings. Dead man's switch armed. Detonation follows cardiac arrest. Environmental systems screamed warnings as the cathedral's breathing accelerated, expanding and contracting with alien rhythm as if we had been swallowed by something vast and patient frost bloomed on heated conduits, while humidity condensed into arterial steam that carried memories not our own. Technical requirements crystallized with brutal clarity. The coupling demanded living conductor, heartbeat to anchor counter-psalm frequencies against warp incursion. When I seated Chi Sigma into the primary socket, the machine closed around my hands like teeth, warm metal braiding with flesh in patterns following 60-degree geometry. Present tense immersion began as tubes threaded through my veins with surgical precision. The universe narrowed to pulse and pressure while ancient phrases carved themselves into marrow. Only in duty does death begin. My blood answered calls I hadn't given, warming toward Blackstone fragments with liquid devotion. A droplet detached from the ascending nave, defying gravity to float toward me with ceremonial patience. It kissed my tongue before I could close my mouth, sweet, cold, carrying memories that weren't mine. Casa plazas, drill yards, children learning cadence because that's what Fortress World children do when worlds die around them. The engine borrowed my heartbeat and returned it perfected, sanded clean of human imperfection until it served larger purpose. Through arterial connection, I felt weight of every Cadian soul flowing through the circuit, their essence converted to hymn against the warp's hungry silence. Orbital pressure critical, Rex voxed through static. Annulus achieving final density, hull, micro-impacts detected across 17 sectors. The coupling drank deeper as my commitment solidified, veins lighting like filament, while bones hummed with blackstone frequencies. Cadia's final hours flooded through me. Cassas burning, orders obeyed. 100,000 final salutes crystallized in hemofluid and preserved in arterial amber. I didn't choke on the ascending blood. I swallowed. Each drop became 1,000 voices whispered inside my teeth, all saying one word with unbearable gentleness. Stand. The hemolith screamed without sound as I prepared to spike my pulse high, triggering overload through biometric cascade. In the darkness gathering at vision's edge, I realized the engine's death wouldn't destroy the corruption. It would transform me into something new, carrying Cadia's essence within blood that would never stop seeking new circuits to complete. I seated key sigma into the coupling with deliberate precision, feeling the machine close around my hands like closing teeth. Warm metal braided with flesh in patterns following 60-degree geometry, tubes unfurling to thread through my veins with surgical precision. The universe narrowed to pulse and pressure as my heartbeat became the engine's borrowed metronome. Melter triggers routed through Medici specs, I reported through gritted teeth, keying detonators to my biometric readings. Deadman switch armed, cardiac manipulation initiated, present tense. Immersion crashed over me like breaking waves. Cadia's final hours flooded through the arterial connection. Cassas burning under alien stars, orders barked through static while children learned drill songs in cellar light. I felt the weight of every Cadian soul flowing through the circuit, their memories crystallized in hemofluid and preserved in arterial amber. Creed's voice echoed through my marrow. Desperate commands mixing with mothers teaching cadence because that's what Fortress World mothers do when hope dies, but duty remains. My veins lit like filament, bones humming with blackstone frequencies while ancient phrases carved themselves into marrow with surgical precision. The hemolith borrowed my heartbeat and returned it perfected, sanded clean of human imperfection until it served larger purpose. Through the coupling, I experienced the salt of tears, ash of burning cassas, cold certainty of duty made flesh. Skitari hold transept lines, I commanded, watching Hale cover my position with shaking lasgun. His arterial script pulsed with sympathetic rhythm, spelling coordinates across his skin in living calligraphy. I deliberately lowered my pulse through Medici discipline, feeling the engine's hunger intensify as my heartbeat slowed to parade rest. 30 beats per minute, 25. The coupling tightened like closing fist, tubes pulsing with arterial light as environmental readings spiked around us. Cardiac rhythm declining, I whispered into failing vox. Approaching detonation threshold. The constructs maintained formation despite the cathedral's convulsions, their synchronized footfalls never breaking cadence even as stone cracked beneath their boots. They served duty beyond death, witnessing the conductor's sacrifice with military precision that transcended flesh and bone. Through arterial connection, I felt the orbital annulus responding, blood halo tightening around shard 17 like closing mouth, pressure waves rolling toward the virtue of iron with mathematical inevitability. My pulse synchronized with 13/8 rhythm as the engine learned to use my circulation as timekeeper for its blasphemous work. 20 beats per minute. 15. The hemolith song climbed a quarter tone, drawing power from ossified depths, while my consciousness expanded to encompass million parade grounds, children learning cadence, soldiers standing at attention in the Emperor's name. Now came the spike. I slammed my heart upward through emergency stimulants, adrenaline flooding my system as pulse climbed toward rupture. 40 beats per minute. 60. 80. The coupling resisted, tubes tightening with obscene hunger, but I had trained for this moment through years of battlefield medicine. 100 beats, I reported clinically. Critical threshold achieved. The Auspex sang. Melter charges obeyed the biometric cascade, heat uncoiling like predator from transept to tear through. Buttress nodes. Chain of white suns stitched along blackstone ribs as the hemolith screamed without sound, everything bowing inward as reality kicked in the stomach. The orbital annulus shattered like breaking glass, ascending blood falling as honest rain for first time in cycles. Sound returned like slap, constructs' lances clattering as formation dissolved, ranks melting into puddles that steamed pink before cooling into inert glaze. But the engine's death convulsion forced final gift into my transformed circulation. From the wounded coupling, a column of blood rose smooth as polished glass, seeking my mouth with lover's patience. I shut my teeth, turned my head, fought with useless vertebrate instincts. The blood filled my nose, parted cartilage, found lungs with surgical precision. I did not drown. I drank, cold that burned. Sweetness, like sugared iron. Not chorus or cacophony, but orderly ranks of thought stepping into place. Casa names, gate codes, fathers' hands fixing children's braids, drill sergeants' rare laughter when recruits finally marched without stumbling. Millions of small endurances arranged in parade formation, duty crystallized beyond death's arbitrary boundary. Environmental reversal began as unnatural cold died. Heat surging through cathedral ribs while frost sublimated into steam. The tubing withdrew with wet reluctance, each filament retracting like tongue while Chi Sigma fused permanently to my chest, not by metal, but by contract written in liquids. My heart restarted with stuttering rhythm, but the blood flowing through my veins was no longer entirely mine. It carried Cadia's essence, genetic memory of every child who had learned parade cadence, every soldier who had died believing duty transcended death. In darkness gathering at vision's edge, a child's voice whispered with unbearable gentleness, "Stand." The constructs lay inert, their animating force dying with the engine. Synchronized footfalls ceased, leaving only natural silence broken by dripping condensation and my labored breathing. But in my chest, another rhythm continued, gentle parade step pull that would never stop. I had become what I sought to destroy, a living hemolith, carrying Cadia's final order within blood that answered calls I hadn't given. The cost was revealed. Transformation complete, but irreversible. Duty transcending death in the Emperor's name. I recorded my after-action report with clinical precision, each word weighted against the silence that had finally replaced the engine's hungry song. The cadaver engine lay broken, its cathedral ribs cracked along 60-degree angles, while constructs dissolved into inert puddles that steamed pink before cooling to arterial glaze. Above us, the orbital annulus cracked and fell as honest rain, obeying gravity for the first time since we made orbit. Casualty assessment. Chiron's choir offline, requires mercy kills, I dictated, voice steady, despite transformation thrumming through my veins. Survivors tagged for macro-incineration. Coordinates marked for Ordo Malleus interdiction with never return sanctions. Environmental restoration began with mechanical precision. Real wind returned, small and ordinary, nosing through bone ribs and sheeted metal, carrying the mineral scent of pulverized stone and the clean edge of frost. Humidity dropped by degrees that made instruments breathe easier. Frost crept back where it belonged, white filigree reclaiming edges the hemolith had stolen. The silence carried weight, but it was rest rather than absence. I moved through the ruins with ritual care, administering mercy to those Skitari whose augmetics pulsed with clotted red that followed failing 13/8 rhythm. One tried to salute. Hale steadied his arm while I pressed the sanctified needle beneath jaw seams, speaking words that transform endings into blessings. Others I tagged for incineration, Auspex ink stamping quarantine sigils on cooling glaze. At the pylon mouth, I lit a votive where stone had parted like a wound. The flame guttered, steadied, then pointed in a direction no wind acknowledged, toward coordinates my transformed blood already knew. Extraction proceeded according to protocol. The shuttle received us with coughing thrusters and burnt oil, hail half-carrying wrecks, while the Skitari's servos clicked in counterpoint to human pulse that had learned alien meter. My hands trembled when I sealed the hatch, not from fatigue, but from gentle parade step pull in my chest, rhythm that would never stop. Zero gravity revealed the transformation's true scope. A globule of my blood detached from a scab, hanging in recycled air before drifting toward the nearest Vox unit, with intent that belonged in living creatures. It touched the grill and spread into perfect 60-degree sigils, edges glowing faintly from within. The Vox hummed at exactly my heartbeat's rate, not the ship's frequency. Communications anomaly detected, I logged, watching encrypted channels emit low tones matching my pulse. The sound carried harmonics of million parade grounds, children learning cadence, soldiers standing at attention in formations transcending flesh and bone. Sensory degradation accelerated as corruption solidified. I could no longer taste rations or smell promethium, only sweet metallic absence where normal sensation should live. My tongue recognized flavors from Casa mess halls, mother's cooking, victory feasts after successful defenses. The dead fed me their experiences through arterial communion. Physical changes manifested with surgical precision. My veins swelled beneath skin, extruding red filaments toward the auspex. The device displayed single word in arterial script, continue. Letters pulsed with borrowed heartbeat, while capillary threads wrote coordinates across bulkheads in wet red ink. Psychological impact assessment, I continued, clinically. Subject experiences constant parade step rhythm in chest cavity. No pain detected. No fear registered. Only duty crystallized beyond death's arbitrary boundary. I issued containment protocols with malleus authority, each seal weighted against witnessed horror. Shard 17 marked for macro incineration. Acheron/Redemptor protocols classified HereTech. All related research terminated by inquisitorial decree. But coordinates continued writing themselves across every surface, crimson ink spelling locations throughout segmentum obscurus. 13 shards, 8 nodes, 13 annuli. The engine's death had transmitted final instructions through my transformed circulation, marking targets for future harvest across the void. Corruption assessment. Irreversible transformation confirmed in primary witness, I dictated. Voice carrying new harmonics drawn from million throats. Subject exhibits hemal anomalies consistent with hemolith integration. Recommend immediate quarantine and extended observation. My pulse sometimes matched 13/8 cadence, sometimes stopped while another quieter rhythm continued. The engine's final gift, timekeeper for work that would never end. During cardiac pauses, children's voices sang drill songs in dialects that should have been silent. As we translated towards system's edge, I realized with growing certainty that I carried something beyond corruption within my veins. Not chaos or decay, but duty transcending death. Service crystallized in arterial amber and preserved beyond flesh's limitations. Final assessment. Threat contained but transformed, I concluded, watching my reflection in polished bulkheads. Eyes carried arterial light, veins spelling coordinates beneath skin in living calligraphy. Recommend exile protocols for primary witness. Subject must remain mobile, never allowing extended contact with population centers. I had become a living hemolith, carrier of Cadia's final order, and through me the planet's sacrifice would continue its eternal march across stars, duty transcending death in the Emperor's name. I concluded my classified log with seals layered deeper than sanctioned protocol, each cipher weighted against witnessed horror that would never see Imperial archives. The cursor blinked patient as void, while I spoke final testimony into channels that would carry condemnation across the segmentum obscurus, marking coordinates with never-returned sanctions that bore my personal seal. Recommendation. Immediate termination of all Acheron/Redemptor protocols under Ordinance 13, Black Cadence. Magos Biologis, Chiron's work, classified heretic. Any attempt to replicate hemal resonance technology constitutes blasphemy against the Emperor's design. My voice carried new harmonics drawn from million throats, words splitting between human authority and something borrowed from parade grounds that would never empty. But even as I spoke condemnation, my transformed blood pulsed with coordinates written in arterial script. The engine's death had transmitted final instructions through my circulation, 13 shards, 8 nodes, 13 annuli, marking targets for future harvest across the void. I was no longer just witness but unwilling carrier of the very corruption I sought to destroy. I spoke the prayer of ending, familiar words that transform conclusions into blessings, but my tongue changed one syllable without permission. Only in duty does death begin, I whispered, admitting truth written in my veins by alien communion. The phrase settled into place like bone set correctly after long misalignment. Physical transformation accelerated as confession solidified. My veins arranged themselves in parade lines beneath skin, arterial scripts spelling coordinates across my arms in living calligraphy. Chi Sigma, fused permanently to my chest, thrummed with steady rhythm, secondary heart keeping time for army that would never rest. My pulse sometimes matched the ship's thrum, sometimes stuttered into 13/8 cadence, sometimes stopped entirely while another quieter rhythm continued. Corruption assessment, transformation, irreversible but controlled, I logged clinically. Subject exhibits hemal anomalies consistent with hemolyth integration. Genetic memory of Cadian bloodlines accessible through arterial communion. Environmental sensors detected gravitational anomaly on distant Vostroya. Dust storm marching across scarred trenches where raindrops surged upward for 3 heartbeats before falling. Answering drum that beat in perfect synchronization with my transformed pulse. The infection was spreading through quantum entanglement, carried by blood that remembered duty beyond death. Cosmic stinger confirmed, I whispered, understanding scope with growing certainty. The engine's influence extended beyond local space, reaching toward any world where Cadian blood had been spilled. Every battlefield, every garrison, every fortress where sons and daughters of the broken world had served, all potential nodes for future harvest. I made final choice with clinical precision. Exile protocols engaged under my own authority, signature sealing orders that would carry me beyond imperial borders into regions where no world could drink too long from my transformed essence. I would become wanderer between systems, carrying Cadia's memory like disease that refused to kill, only transform. Personal log, final entry. Interrogator Medici Voss chooses voluntary exile under Containment Directive Omega. Subject must remain mobile, preventing extended contact with population centers. The threat is contained but transformed, carried within the protector. In dark compartment where recycled air tasted of copper and remembrance, I stripped my rosette of its chain and sealed it in bulkhead seam, small heresy of form to keep faith with spirit. Authority would follow the symbol. I needed it to follow the message instead. My name and final seals entered Magistratum records with orders no one wanted to carry. The shuttle's navigation systems recalibrated automatically, plotting course toward empty sectors where dying stars cast no light on inhabited worlds. I would teach crews to mistrust geometry and love clumsy circles, sabotage and seal to keep the long arithmetic from balancing on blood. As translation began, globule of my blood detached from healing scab. It floated in zero gravity with purpose that belonged in living creatures, aligning along invisible angles before touching bulkhead with gentle precision. The droplet tapped metal in perfect cadence. Left, right, left. The sound carried through hull and bone, answering every rhythm in the ship. More droplets multiplied in sympathetic response, each finding voice in metal and plastic and flesh. Through sensors, I felt distant worlds responding, children learning drill songs in languages they didn't recognize, tides pulling at 13/8 intervals, storms aligning with alien meter. Ultimate horror confirmed, I whispered into failing Vox. Cadia stands, somewhere in me. Through me, the planet's sacrifice continues its eternal march across stars, duty transcending death in the Emperor's name. My reflection in polished surfaces showed transformation complete. Eyes carrying arterial light, mouth moving in silent cadence I had never learned but somehow knew. I wore no helm, but shadows suggested one. Regulation Cadian pattern, crest tied with braid that had never been mine. Between stars where no light touched inhabited worlds, I prepared for exile that would last until galaxy itself learned to march in step. The tapping intensified as systems learned new rhythm, hull humming at frequencies matching parade ground cadence. In darkness, children's voices sang lullabies about soldiers who served beyond flesh, who stood guard in dreams, who kept faith when hope died. The 13/8 rhythm would never stop. Left, right, left. Cadia stands, and through me, it always would.